It was October 26, 2005, where, on a firearms discussion forum called The Firing Range, a user going by the name ForbiddenForum posted a question. He said he was 19 years old, living in Orange County, California, and that he was having trouble buying a specific type of buckshot ammunition for his Remington 870 shotgun. His reasoning was that a gang had shown up to his house the previous Halloween and shot up his pumpkins, and he wanted to be prepared in case they came back. It seemed like a strange story, but forum members responded with advice, then with mockery when the thread started to feel off. Most people who saw it probably forgot about it within the hour. But what they didn't know was that across other corners of the internet, this same person had been posting things that were far, far darker. Things that, looking back, couldn't have been clearer about where this was heading. His name was William Freund, born around 1986 and raised in Aliso Viejo, California. From early on, William had been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a neurological condition that makes social interaction genuinely difficult, affecting things like eye contact, conversation, and the ability to read other people's intentions. For William, school was rough. Students would punch and kick his backpack as he walked down the hallway, and he'd just take it all without retaliation. He struggled to hold eye contact, struggled to carry a conversation, and felt that even the people closest to him, his parents, his doctor, didn't really understand what he was going through. And probably the cruelest part was that when someone was actually being genuine with him, he couldn't tell. His instinct was to assume they were setting him up, which only pushed people further away. After school, he worked part-time at a computer repair shop in Corona del Mar and helped his father out at the family print shop. He was capable at both, but by all accounts, he kept entirely to himself and didn't have much of a life outside of work. So, he turned to the internet. Online, he could take on different identities, play different characters, and engage with people without the part of socializing that had always been the problem for him. He played games like Doom 3, spent time across various forums, and posted on sites like friendfinder.com and agelesslove.com, genuinely asking if anyone out there wanted to be his friend. In one post he wrote, "I've never really had a friend. I've never had someone I can share more intimate conversation with, or just have a good time with. I want to experience doing things together with a buddy, even having fun, which I never had." He also spent a lot of his time on Wrong Planet, a community built specifically for people with autism, Asperger's, and other neurological differences. It was somewhere he could talk to people who actually understood what his day-to-day life felt like, and for a while, it probably served that purpose. But in the final 2 weeks of October, something shifted. His posts became frantic, filled with typos and run-on sentences that were hard to follow. He was writing about wanting to end his life, describing the methods he'd already looked into, and the ways he'd considered doing it. He said he needed to get away from the stress of the world for a bit. On October 19th, he posted that he thought the only thing left to do was admit himself to a hospital, and that he felt like he needed to end it all, even hinting that he might not make it to Halloween. He even posted on Craigslist, looking to give away his pug. And then, in among all of that, he wrote that his plan was to start what he called a terror campaign, to hurt those that had hurt him. He told people bluntly what he was going to do, but most people thought he was just trolling. The moderators of Wrong Planet, to their credit, did try to contact his family after seeing the posts, but by the time they did, the thread on Something Awful had already been closed, and he had started posting elsewhere. On October 26th, William posted on The Firing Range, the firearms forum of an American comedy website called Something Awful, under the name ForbiddenForum. The post read, "I have a problem. I live in Orange County and I'm trying to buy a heavy shot buckshot, or just whichever if they don't have it. I'm 19 years old, and every shop I go to that has it, Grant's Guns, Saddleback Gun Store, Yeti Gunsmith, claims it's a waste of money and a birdshot is better for personal defense. They always ask me why I want to buy a heavy shot for my Remington 870 home defense, like I'm buying some armor-piercing bullets or something. Sheesh. Is there something against buckshot in the shotgun world? To me, a birdshot is like less than lethal. You use it if you want your attacker to run around after you shoot him. If I have people like last Halloween bringing out a rifle and shooting my garage and my dad's leg, broke the bone and everything, I don't think a birdshot will cut it. Basically, I'm asking, is birdshot okay for defense? Is there any Orange County shop that you know that doesn't give you mouth if you try to buy heavy shot buckshot? And why is a buckshot like the new AK-47 barrel? It's taboo. I'm currently at work at the moment and don't think I could get my dad to show his legs on the internet. So, no pics, sorry. Users jumped in with recommendations, pointing him to stores, debating birdshot versus buckshot, with one even warning him he'd get the chair for responding to pumpkin vandals with that kind of firepower. But nobody knew what his true intentions were. And on October 29th, William followed through with his terror campaign. That morning, he put on a dark cape and a paintball mask and walked into the neighbouring house, where he shot and killed 22-year-old Christina Smith and her father Vernon, who was 45. Vernon's son Brandon managed to escape out the back door, and Vernon's wife Denise was at work at the time. William then crossed the street, fired at another house, and tried to shoot a neighbour before his shotgun jammed. Then he walked home and turned the gun on himself. But when investigators started looking into his online history, what they found was that the internet hadn't really been working out for him either. On the same day he made that post on the firing range, he'd been banned from Something Awful altogether. And on Wrong Planet, the one community built specifically for people going through what he was going through, he'd spent his final weeks writing some of his most desperate messages. The place he'd turned to when everything else had fallen apart was falling apart too, and he was running out of roads. The internet was supposed to be the place where none of that other stuff mattered, but the same struggles that had followed him through school and through work had followed him there too. There was nowhere left that felt like it was working. By the end, it seemed like every door, online and off, had closed on him. In the weeks that followed, the family filed a lawsuit claiming this was a preventable incident, but I was unable to find out any further information on how far it went. I think what makes this case so difficult to sit with is that you can't help but feel for William on some level. He spent his whole life being pushed out at school, at work, and eventually even online, the one place he'd hoped might be different. And in those final weeks, he was reaching out in the only ways he knew how, and nobody reached back in time. But none of that changes what he did. Christina Smith was 22 years old. Her father, Vernon, was 45. They were at home on a Saturday morning, and they never got to leave. And they didn't deserve any part of it. There's a YouTube channel that's been active since November 2011. In that time, the person running it has uploaded over 9,000 videos. And in over 12 years of doing this, the channel has picked up 211 subscribers and just over 62,000 total views across everything he's ever posted. Most of his videos have no title. They go up as camera file names and strings of letters and numbers that mean nothing to anyone but him. And the descriptions, when they exist, read like log entries. The date, the time, the serial number of the memory card the footage was saved to, even the room number of whichever hotel he's staying in. All of it documented with a precision that suggests this matters enormously to him, even if nobody else is paying attention. And for the most part, nobody is. Most of his videos have view counts in the single digits, and when you start going through what he's been filming and what he's been writing, you start to wonder how much of it he actually has control over. I first came across Jie Song through a post on Reddit, where someone described finding his channel through a site called PetitTube, which, for those who don't know, is basically a website that pulls up YouTube videos with little to no views, so you're essentially browsing content that nobody has ever seen. And this person had stumbled onto his channel through it, which is how most people seem to find him, completely by accident. In their post, they described what they found. Videos of him talking about hackers interfering with his mobile data, a video of him showing off his toilet, clips that are only a second or two long filming what appears to be nothing, and they mentioned that the first video they came across was him talking about someone putting a tag on something inside his house, a house that looked completely empty because he appears to live in hotels by himself. They ended the post by saying he gives off an impression of not being fully mentally stable, and his videos were a glimpse into his mind. That post is what led me down this rabbit hole, and the further in I went, the harder it was to come back out. From what he shared online, Jie Song, also known as Jie Song, was born on September 30th, 1967, which makes him 58 years old. He's based in Pensacola, Florida, and he attended the Institute of International Relations, which he says was part of an American university in Eastern Asia around 1986. He has a sister, and his parents and extended family appear to be Chinese, with his own name written in both English and traditional Chinese characters, suggesting roots in Taiwan rather than mainland China. He describes himself as a digital creator and lists himself as the founder of a company. Beyond those few details, Jie Song exists almost entirely online, and it's there that things start to get complicated. He joined YouTube on November 27, 2011, and hasn't really stopped since. His earliest videos from 2013 and 2014 are what you'd expect from someone who's just picked up a camera and doesn't quite know what to do with it. Most of them are a few seconds long. Some have 3 views, and some have none. But mixed in among the mundane stuff, even in those early years, there are videos that feel a little different. One example is from 2014, where in the description he writes he seems to be addressing someone through his television screen, someone he believes is on the other end, watching him back.
The TV just frozen. Right after I turned on the recording, it changed to something else. Obviously somebody is manipulating this TV. There's a knocking noise just now, very tiny one. Not very tiny, but quite small. Not loud noise over there. Just now, over there. And
by 2015, he's uploading a video of himself going to the toilet, where in the description he explains he thinks someone has been putting laxatives in his food, and that he's saving the footage as evidence for police and prosecutors. Then there's a video where he's been stopped by a Walmart security guard for trespassing, and police have been called. He tells the officer it isn't fair, that he'll have to defend himself in court in English, because it isn't his first language, and then partway through the video, you can hear what sounds like a Joe Biden voicemail playing, with a voice telling him he can collect checks at one number, but that if he wants to reach the White House, he should call a different one.
Hey folks, it's Joe Biden. Thanks for calling. I can only get text at this number, but if you want to call the White House, it's 202-456-1414.
Right now.
202
I'll try to remember next time.
1414. Looking forward to hearing from you.
It seems like he's trying to get through to that number right there, in the hopes that Joe would somehow come to his aid. He also goes live on YouTube, and the streams follow the same pattern as everything else on his channel. One from December 23rd, 2023, starts in his hotel room and runs for nearly 2.5 hours, with him leaving the room at around the 20-minute mark, and the stream just continuing on its own, pointing at an empty wall before eventually cutting off. Another stream shows him pointing the camera out of his hotel window before seemingly falling asleep, the stream still running. You can even hear him snoring in the background. And YouTube isn't the only place he does this. He's been broadcasting himself just as consistently and just as regularly on Facebook. In one post from February 2026, he writes from his hotel room in Pensacola, which is where he seems to have been living for some time, describing how a man from a neighboring room had been passing on everything he said to someone he believed was orchestrating a campaign against him, and that a truck driver parked outside was likely one of the organized criminals involved. He ends the post by urging the Supreme Court and the Department of Justice to intervene. In another post, he writes that he's been unable to reach the White House or the Department of Justice, which lines up with what we saw in that Walmart video. And then there's the post about his college education, where he explains that electronic invaders had remotely changed the name of his university on his Facebook profile to the wrong thing, and that he'd had to fight to get it corrected, only to find they changed it back again. He has 2 Facebook profiles, both active, both posting the same kind of content, addressed to nobody in particular, and yet written as though everyone who matters is reading. Now, we can't diagnose anyone, and that's not what this is. But what he's describing across years of posts, neighbors coordinating against him, hackers accessing his devices, and strangers outside his hotel being part of organized criminal networks targeting him specifically, is something that closely resembles what's commonly referred to as gang stalking, which is a term used by people who believe they're being systematically followed and harassed by a coordinated group. Mental health professionals generally view this as a symptom of certain conditions rather than something that's actually taking place. Though again, we can only go on what he's chosen to share publicly. What concerns me more, and honestly something I haven't come across before, is the White House contact. Standing in a Walmart car park with police in front of him, his instinct is to try and get through to a Joe Biden voicemail. That, on its own, is one thing. But the voicemail telling him he can only receive checks at that number genuinely worries me, because if someone out there has found a way to present themselves to him as a direct line to the White House, and he's been sending money to that number, that's a very different situation. And the live streams, the ones where he goes live, leaves his room, and just lets the camera run for hours pointing at an empty wall, or falls asleep on camera, those feel less like content, and more like a security system. If you genuinely believe that a coordinated group of people are watching you and tampering with your belongings, leaving a live camera running while you're out or asleep starts to make a strange kind of sense. Maybe the streams aren't for an audience. Maybe it's just for him. Everything shown in this section is information Jie has made publicly available himself, across platforms he continues to post on every day. And that's what makes this such a strange rabbit hole to go down, because we genuinely don't know why he's doing any of it. We don't know what he's hoping to achieve, who he thinks is watching, or what any of it means to him. And that mystery is probably never going to have an answer. Whatever is going on with him, the world he's living in looks very different to the one the rest of us see. But through all of it, the camera keeps rolling. Every day, thousands of people leave reviews on Amazon, and for the most part, nobody pays much attention to them. But every now and then, someone writes something that makes you stop scrolling. In 2014, a user began leaving reviews for various products, shovels, knives, and padlocks, and what they were writing read like dark jokes for capturing and murdering people. And for 2 years, they were mostly ignored. But what nobody realized at the time was that they weren't jokes at all. The man behind the reviews was Todd Kohlhepp. Born in 1971 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, his childhood was split between his mother and stepfather in South Carolina and Georgia, and his biological father in Arizona. And by 9 years old, he'd been admitted to a psychiatric hospital. At 15, he kidnapped a 14-year-old girl at gunpoint and assaulted her. He was arrested, diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, and sentenced to 15 years. He got out in 2001, moved to South Carolina, got 2 degrees, and eventually obtained a real estate license, which he managed by lying about his criminal conviction on the application. The firm he built grew to 12 agents, and he was considered one of the top-selling agents in the region, and owned nearly 100 acres of land in Woodruff, South Carolina, surrounded by a chain-link fence he'd spent $80,000 putting up. To anyone who dealt with him, he was a successful businessman, but between those years, he was also a murderer. On November 6, 2003, 4 people were found shot dead inside and outside a motorcycle shop called Superbike Motorsports in Chesney, South Carolina. The victims were the shop's owner, Scott Ponder, who was 30, his mother, Beverly Guy, who worked as the bookkeeper and was 52, service manager, Brian Lucas, who was 29, and mechanic Chris Sherbert, who was 26. According to Kohlhepp's mother, he'd gone in to try and return a motorcycle, and the staff had laughed at him. He came back with a gun, and took their lives. In December 2015, a married couple named Johnny and Megan Coxey were hired to do work on Kohlhepp's property. They were reported missing on the 22nd and were later found buried on his land, both shot dead. Then, in August 2016, a 30-year-old woman named Carla Brown and her boyfriend Charles Carver, who was 32, took a job clearing brush on his property and disappeared. What made their disappearance particularly unsettling was that in the days after they went missing, posts started appearing on Carver's Facebook account, including one claiming that he and Carla had gotten married, and later ones sharing links to news coverage of their own disappearance. Someone else was in control of that account. Police traced their last known phone signals to Kohlhepp's property on November 3, 2016, and when they searched it, they heard banging coming from inside a metal shipping container. Inside, they found Carla Brown, chained to the wall. She'd been there for 2 months. Carver was found in a shallow grave nearby. Kohlhepp was arrested the same day. Shortly after his arrest, investigators looking into Kohlhepp's digital footprint found an Amazon account under the username Me, linked to a wish list that had his full name on it. The account had been active from May 2014 all the way through to August 2016, the same month Kayla Brown disappeared, and across that time he'd left around 140 reviews across dozens of products, ranging from Season 6 of The Walking Dead to pet feeders to tactical vests and gun accessories. And then, there were the other ones. For a folding shovel, he wrote, "Keep in car for when you have to hide the bodies and you left the full-size shovel at home." For a knife, "Haven't stabbed anyone yet, but I'm keeping the dream alive, and when I do it, it will be with a quality tool like this." For a padlock, "Solid locks, have 5 on a shipping container, won't stop them, but sure will slow them down till they are too old to care." For a chainsaw, "Works excellent. Getting the neighbour to stand still while you chase him with it is hard enough without having an easy-to-use chainsaw." And one review for a product described simply as being blacker than his soul and priced right. All of it had been sitting there publicly on Amazon for 2 years, but disturbingly, none of it led to his arrest. None of it was flagged, reported, or investigated until after he was already in a cell. Kohlhepp pleaded guilty to 7 counts of murder on May 26, 2017, and was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. During the process, he agreed to confess to the Superbike murders in exchange for being allowed to speak with his mother, transfer money to a friend's child's college fund, and give her a photograph. When his mother asked him how many other victims there were beyond the ones investigators had found, he told her she didn't have enough fingers to count them. As of today, he's never given authorities the full picture. Carla Brown survived, and in her first public interview after her rescue, she said that in order to stay alive, she had to make Kohlhepp believe things were going his way, and that she'd made him think whatever she had to in order to keep herself from being hurt. Looking back at those reviews now, it's hard not to wonder whether part of him wanted someone to find them. Jokes about hiding bodies, about shipping containers, and about stabbing people, all sitting there under his real name, publicly visible for 2 years. Whether it was arrogance or something darker, the warnings were there the whole time, but nobody noticed, until it was too late.